So what is blockchain? It's a term that many of you have probably heard before, but it can be confusing. A lot of people throw it around and it starts to feel like no one's quite sure what it actually means. So blockchain in its simplest terms is just a system of record keeping. It's a way of keeping track of stuff, of information, but in particular, it is a system of shared record keeping. So whenever you have multiple people or multiple parties that are trying to do something together and they need to keep track of those activities or that information, they need a shared point of reference. They need a single point of truth. That's what blockchain does. It allows people to coordinate in a single place with the same facts, the same set of information, so that everyone is on the same page. Now, the reason this is so important and such a paradigm shift is the way we typically think of data or information, if we're not thinking about blockchain, is it's something that's private, it's something that's owned and managed, kind of like data. So if you think about who owns the data and who manages the data, you want to make sure it's in a single place so that that person or that entity controls it. And then if you need to operate or interact with some other entity, you now have an issue where you have two systems of accounting that need to talk to one another. So most of our financial system today is built on that type of model, a network of different accounting systems, different records, different sets of data, and then we need to figure out how they communicate. And so the automated clearinghouse, ACH, is a system for doing that. But what's unfortunate about that is it's basically a system of reconciliation. You have to make sure that all the different accounts line up, that all the information is in agreement every day. And so part of why we have delays in payment systems is that reconciliation process. Blockchain solves that problem by having a single record and every party is simply referencing the same source of truth. Now, to try and understand this, I encourage people to go to the Bitcoin white paper. So if you go to bitcoin.org and you go to the introduction, you can scroll down here to white paper, click on this right here, and this is the Bitcoin white paper in 9 pages. Now, I'm not going to talk about Bitcoin as money in this context. I want to talk about how Bitcoin uses the technology of blockchain. So you can't have crypto without blockchain. You can have blockchain without crypto, but the two are related. And so what I don't like is when some people say, I really like blockchain, but I hate Bitcoin. They want to drive a wedge between the two. Okay, I'll grant that blockchain has applications outside of crypto. But what I think is so interesting about crypto is the way it uses blockchain to do a lot of very interesting things. So if you scroll through this white paper, so in other episodes I've talked about this introduction. Commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions serving as trusted third parties to process electronic payments. So blockchain is about trying to take the payment system and do payments without these trusted third parties. How do we have a system of record keeping without using a trusted third party to keep the records? And so in the second paragraph, what is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust, not the trusted third party, which would allow any two willing parties to transact directly with each other without the need for a trusted third party. So blockchain, or Bitcoin in this case, is peer-to-peer. You have the two people doing the transaction without that trusted third party. But the question is, who keeps track of this? If we're going to have these transactions that are peer-to-peer, how do we know that these transactions are legitimate? That's where blockchain comes in. If you continue on to page 2, you'll see that it then describes how transactions work on the Bitcoin blockchain. Check out this first sentence here. We define an electronic coin as a chain of digital signatures. Take a second and try and wrap your head around that sentence. I'm going to read that again. We define an electronic coin as a chain of digital signatures. A lot of people wrestle with Bitcoin because they feel like, well, it's just a bunch of zeros and ones. It doesn't have any value. It's, what's it worth? A Bitcoin actually represents a history of transactions from one digital wallet to another, and it is simply a record of where that value is at any one point in time. And so what blockchain does is it creates a record, a history of transactions, which is illustrated here in this diagram. So you have transactions 1, 2, and 3, and you have this cryptographic proof or cryptographic method for making sure that those transactions are safe and secure, and also that they are legitimate. And so that's where you get into public key and private key. I'll talk about that in a later episode. But the only thing that's really important to understand here is that you have multiple transactions, which are a history or a record of transactions. We're then going to group those together into blocks. We're going to create chains or chains of blocks, and then that's where we get the blockchain. And so if you want to understand blockchain, you can go to all these other sources that have nothing to do with crypto, but I actually think Bitcoin is the perfect place to start because Bitcoin uses blockchain in such a clear way. It's all about transferring value and how do we keep a record of those transactions. And so the problem that's illustrated here, you see in this next sentence, the problem is the payee can't verify that one of the owners did not double spend the coin. So again, if you're going to have digital cash, how do we know that it's not going from one wallet to another and being spent in two different places? That's the double spend problem. We need a record to know where that money exists, where it resides in those digital wallets. Blockchain is just an accounting system. But what's unique here is that the accounting system is shared. We think of accounting as it's on this system or it's managed by this entity. This is a shared system of accounting. And so the other real innovation here that blockchain provides is if you look in this next section, blockchain is a timestamp server. It's simply keeping time and it's recording in that sequence, which is history, what are the new transactions, what are the changes to the ledger, and how do we record that in an efficient manner in which everyone can agree upon. And so whether you really fully understand blockchain or not, hopefully you can understand a few things. Blockchain is a distributed ledger technology. So it's shared. Distributed means shared among a network of users. Blockchain is decentralized. So there's no centralized authority. There's no trusted third party that owns it or manages. It is managed by the decentralized network. Blockchain is also immutable. So once you create this record, this history, that history can't be changed. That's what part of what makes the cryptography so powerful, because you can't go in and change some past record without changing everything that happened after that. And so it's impossible to go back and tamper with any of that history. And so the key terms that I think are important to understand blockchain are distributed, decentralized, and immutable. But the other thing that's cool about Bitcoin is you can actually see the Bitcoin blockchain at work. And so if you go to this other website, blockchain.com, it has what's called an explorer, which is simply reporting all the transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain. And so if we scroll down here, we can see these are all of the latest transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain. You can see this in real time, these new transactions of people transferring value from one wallet to another, and it's being recorded on this public distributed ledger. And so each of these transactions are new, but notice this title here, they are unconfirmed. We need some process for confirming transactions. If we're going to have a shared ledger, we need a consensus mechanism. We need a way to agree on what transactions are legitimate and which ones are not, which ones are approved. But we're not going to use a third party. We're not going to use some card network. We're not going to use a bank balance sheet. We're simply going to use the blockchain network itself. And so if we go back here to the latest blocks, these are blocks that have been added to the Bitcoin blockchain. And here you can see in this column, height. This simply records the sequence. 7300,000, 001, 002, 003. You see the sequence? That is the timestamp server. These are each recorded in sequence, in order, and this is the most recent block. And here you can see that there is a block header. It maintains all the information about what's in that block. It references the previous block to make sure that those are lining up. And then it has all the transactions that are in that block. It records every public address, where the money is being sent from and where it is being sent to. And so this is simply a ledger. It's a record of transactions that have been sent on the Bitcoin blockchain from one address to another, and it's being verified by the blockchain network. So the power of blockchain as programmable money is, rather than delegating all of this process to someone else, a trusted third party, let's use a trustless system built solely on code and built solely on a network, a decentralized network that is confirming these transactions. So it internalizes the verification process, and it is shared, distributed. It's totally transparent. Everyone knows exactly what's going on and where things are going, and it is immutable. It is unchangeable. Therefore, it's safe and secure. And so this is the application of blockchain to digital money in the form of Bitcoin. But blockchain has so many other applications, even in the world of crypto. And so the crypto ecosystem as a platform is built on blockchain.